Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Return Missionary Next Chapters podcast. I am your host, Sid Bassett. Today, we're sitting down with Will Simmons. Will has a resume most would dream of, but this Texas-born entrepreneur is one of the nicest, grounded men you will ever meet. To the world, he is the managing partner of Signal Capital, a Harvard MBA, and a former advisor at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. But to Will, these titles are just the next chapters of a story that truly began with a journey filled with faith and devotion to God and family. We're diving into how the lessons he learned in life and the mission field provided the ultimate lessons for a life centered on God, and the motto from one of his mentors: first learn, then earn, and then give back to others. From the oil fields of Texas to the halls of the Ivy League, we are grateful to have Will with us today. Will, so good to have you on the show.
Hey, great to be here, Sid. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, we're going to start before your mission. And you served in Chile, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Santiago North.
Santiago North, all right. So before your mission, just curious, what did you have an imagination your life was going to be like post-mission, sort of going into your career? I'm curious, all little kids decide they want to do something young. What was your thought?
Well, Sid, I wish I had a big grand plan for what my life had wanted to be before my mission, but I'd say a lot of that came during my mission. I'll tell you that when I was really young, I really wanted to be a long haul trucker. And then I thought that would be a fun way to see the world. Luckily, or for better or worse, my plans changed. I'd say as I was entering college and about to go on my mission, I really wanted to be a part of building something. And I didn't know what that would be, but I wanted to be a part of building a business. Of course, I wanted to have a family and I wanted to be active in church. But that is really where my life plans ended before my mission.
I love being a long-range trucker, not just a trucker, but long range. You may
Oh
like some
yeah.
time
Oh
to
yeah. Long
yourself.
haul trucking, just me and the open road.
Hey, I'm a Texas-born kid myself, and I can tell you that, trucking is a big deal. I love that that was part of your roots as well. And you said about being active in church. I don't know about you, but I grew up in a ward where we had great, youth. In my schools, I was the only one most of the years of my life, so I represented the church to most of my friends when I was younger. Was that your experience as well?
Very much the same way. In our community growing up, we grew up in Houston, Texas, and in my high school, it was my sister and I were the only members of our school until I was a senior, and when we had a few freshmen come into the school that were members. But that was a great experience for me. I had wonderful friends that supported me and my values, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But it was actually a great experience for me. I will say it didn't give me a lot of examples, local examples of what life could be like as a member of the church. But I didn't know that I was missing out on anything. I I I was really had great examples in my life with my parents and my extended family about what a good successful life could be in the church, and that's all I needed.
Like Nephi, some of our beginning chapters start off with being born of goodly parents, right? So tell us about your parents and their support of you in those very formative years of your life.
Absolutely. Well, my parents, they met in Houston, Texas. My dad grew up in Kaysville, Utah. My mom grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana. They both went to state schools for universities, and my dad at the University of Utah, my mom at Louisiana State, LSU, and both ended up working in Houston. My parents met there and got married, and my sister came a few years later, and I came a year or so after that. And we just had a great small family. My sister and I, who are still really close, we're both back in Houston now. And all growing up, my parents were great examples, very active in the church and active in their communities, and always made it a priority to serve others and serve, whether it was at the opera or with the children's hospital or in any capacity at school. They were always serving. It was a great experience because my parents, we actually got sealed as a family when I was about 4 years old. My mom was not a member of the church growing up. My dad was, and my mom got baptized a few years after they got married, and that was, I think, a really exciting day for all of us. My dad especially, although I can't say that I remember the day. I don't think I was there. I think I was still a twinkle in their eye, and I never once saw anything but love for one another and an appreciation for the gospel in the church. And that was a great example to me.
You know, as many times as we've talked, Will, I didn't know all this about you. First off, I think I remember you're from Houston like me, so I think that, but you probably went to the nicer schools. I didn't go to the nice schools
I went
in
wherever I was
Houston.
sent.
Love that. Well, so you and I have met. First time we met was in London, I believe, and we connected there. And it was because of your parents, especially your father, who I think with his brother had started an advisory business that was world renowned in our oil and gas space. So when you told me the last name of Simmons, I did ask about
Yeah.
any relation, and when you told me the relation, I was quite impressed with you immediately. Of course, as I came to know you, I got more and more impressed with you. So let's go back to sort of the high school years. I know that for me personally, going to high school without any other influence of the church, except for the very, very few friends that I had in young men's or young women's, there's always that time where you have to make the decision. Am I going to serve a mission? Now, even if you grew up singing the song, I hope they call me on a
Yeah.
mission. What was your journey like to going on a mission?
Yeah. Well, look, there was I'll describe a little bit of it. There was another family in our ward who had boys that were a little bit older than me, and they were great examples. And I remember seeing one of them go on a mission and thinking, "Man, that's really cool. I can't wait to do that too." That may be the only missionary I remember giving a farewell talk in our ward growing up. And so this was not something that we saw a lot of. I always wanted to go on a mission. And I turned 18 my senior year, and at that time you had to be 19 to go on a mission. And I turned 19 July after I graduated from high school.
Mm.
I always assumed that I would go on a mission when I was 19. But, life was happening fast and I got accepted to go to Texas A&M University and where I wanted to go to school and I found myself my freshman year of college. I was 19 and I was at school. I wasn't on a mission. And it wasn't a conscious thought or conscious decision not to go on a mission. It was just going through the steps that life had in front of me.
Mm.
And I had a great bishop in Houston that was always counseling me and preparing me to make good decisions. I had great parents who were supportive of me going on a mission, but I can't say that anybody ever asked me, "Have you started your papers?" And when I got to A&M, my first time sitting down with the bishop there, he asked me, he said, "When are you going on a mission?" And I said, "Well, soon, I hope." And he said, "Well, let's get your papers in and let's start getting you prepared to go on a mission." And so that's when I really started preparing to go on a mission was that freshman year of A&M, and then I left the summer after my freshman year.
You know, Sometimes we're afraid to ask young men, have you put your papers in? You going on your mission? Have you been to the temple? These are all things that sometimes we're afraid to say, so we don't, right? We don't want to
Yeah.
offend. We don't want to presume. And yet you went through all those years without being asked. And it took a bold bishop to step in and say,
Yeah.
hey, Will, when you put your papers in.
Yeah, I
So,
guess it's kind of like inviting people to church, right? It's always on our
yeah.
mind, but we never want to do it because we're scared and sometimes we just need somebody to just do it. Just ask the question.
And it's interesting because we're going to segue that into your mission a little bit. We won't spend there much time, but we'll jump into the next chapters after your mission. But you go on your mission, and invitations is what you're all about, right? So, just curious, you get on your mission, and in Chile, I presume you didn't know much Spanish, or at least you learned all of it in the MTC. So, tell us some of those things you did learn about your mission before we jumped right after your mission.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I thought I knew Spanish until I got to Chile and then got to the MTC and realized I really didn't know that much Spanish. And my first companion there was an awesome example. He was older, he was probably maybe 24 or 25, a local Chilean who had gotten baptized a little bit, in his early 20s and so was an awesome missionary. Really didn't speak any English, so it was all about understanding the language and following him and trying to be as obedient as I could be. And there are so many things that I learned on the mission. One was how much joy it can bring you to focus on other people and other people's problems instead of your own. And that is one lesson that I think is universal, right? Whenever you get really down or stressed or focused on what's going on wrong in your life, the best remedy, I think, is to focus on other people and serve others and make that a focal point.
Yeah.
Obviously, understanding more deeply the atonement of Christ was so important. Learning how to make friends and relationships with people that you had very little in common with, but relationships that were focused on a common goal of coming closer to Christ was an awesome experience. There's so much I could learn. And I'd say that one of the things that I've tried to do better about or do better with as I've grown up in life is to explain to people that aren't members of the church what I learned while I was serving as a missionary of the church. And it's something that I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the right answer to that question is, because I think it's such a powerful missionary tool to say, I served as a servant of Jesus Christ for 2 years in a foreign
Right.
country, in a foreign tongue, where all day long I was proselyting. And when people ask, what did you learn? How do you answer that question in 30 seconds in an elevator pitch while bearing your testimony and letting them know how much you learned as an individual about yourself and how it prepared you to be a better father and husband and friend and business person? And what are your thoughts, Sid, on how to
Yeah.
answer that question?
It's a good question. I don't think I've been asked that in the elevator lately, but I think that one of the things that I remember very vividly in my mind about returning home, and I'm going to ask you that question in a minute, was that I felt like I had accomplished something important.
Yeah.
And before that, like you said, I went to schools where I was sent, right? It was sort of I just sort of followed the path that was outlined for me. There's a pretty bright lights on that path, actually. And so I was the youngest of 7 children. All the boys had served missions. All the girls had gotten older, get married in the temple. I kinda had a pattern for me. But when I went on my mission, I realized this was on me. Everything was on me.
Yeah.
And I realized that I had to make a choice to stay on my mission every day. And by the time I completed those 2 years, I thought, I did something. I did something important. It had
Yeah.
meaning, it had purpose, and God loved me. So I guess if I were asked the question, what did I learn on my mission? I would say that God loves me, and I feel valued because of that love. And so I think that's what drove me. And if you're gonna flip it back, I'm gonna flip it back on you now. But it is in that sense of self-worth that's very important.
Yeah.
And we had 2 years where essentially everything was taken care of, but we had to decide to stay. And we had to decide to make those invitations every day. We had to decide to get up and get going and become a disciple of Jesus Christ. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not always easy to answer, but, as you think about it, you became in my mind, you become, a son of God, and you can believe it,
Yeah.
as opposed to just telling it to other people.
That reminds me of a saying I heard that Elder Holland said when he was serving in Chile, because he served there as a general authority for some time over the Chilean area. And I don't know, I've never done the research to really know if this can be attributed to him, but I like the saying, so I'll attribute it to him anyway. But he said, the mission is good for every missionary, but not every missionary is good for the mission. And I think we know what he's talking about in the second half of that. That some people are different levels of maturity and everything else, but it is true that the mission is good for every missionary, and that's another thing I guess I would learn. I learned on my mission that really helped me going forward is that everybody's on their own path, on their own timeline, and to drop the expectations of what somebody should be because of where they are, or what somebody could accomplish because of what they've accomplished in the past. And you could just see so many times, whether it was in the lives of the people you were teaching, the lives of the members you were serving with, or the lives of the missionaries that were in your mission, about how much they could accomplish when they let the Lord work in their lives. And I will say, when I went to business school, one of the big lessons that came away from business school was how important it is to delegate important decisions to the people on the front line that are closest to the information at hand. Not the people that have the most education or the people that have the highest title, but the people that are on the front lines. And how many of the most successful organizations delegate those decisions, the really important decisions, to the people on the front line. And that's what makes companies great.
And, that's what God did for us, right? He delegated the most
Yeah,
important work
yeah, that's right.
to 19-year-old boys. Isn't that a scary thought?
Yeah, it still is.
It still is. Yeah, you're right. I love that. Okay, so first off, I just wanna highlight a point that you made, and that is something that I have found in my later years and in my later career as a therapist, is that, the more you get to know somebody, deeply know somebody, the more you're going to love that person. And the more you love that person, the easier it is to serve that person. And the more you serve that person, the better you feel about who you are as a person. So it's a great cycle, and I appreciate you sharing that with our listeners. Okay, so we're moving forward. We're now home from our mission. Tell us about those first days, weeks. What do you remember about those early days?
I remember being very excited to see the girl that had been riding me for 2 years. So my freshman year, I met a girl named Paige, and she was awesome. And she did not notice me for a good 3 months, but when she finally did notice me, we did start dating, and it was fantastic. We had a great relationship, and I thought, wow, this will be the perfect short-term relationship because I'm going to go on a mission as soon as this second semester ends, and we won't have dated for very long, so it won't be very serious. But then my mission call came, and it wasn't until September. And so I thought, oh no, well, there's no way I'm letting Paige go. And it turns out that over that summer, we really, our relationship became more serious, and we really fell in love. And so, anyway, we ended up writing over 2 years. And so when I came back, I started up school at A&M again, and she was still at A&M. She was a senior at that time. I was a sophomore, and it was really fun to just start back up a relationship with her. And it was rocky, and she was like, who is this weirdo that's been gone for so long? And we definitely had a lot of maturing to do, but we ended up getting engaged over the Christmas break, our my sophomore year, her senior year, and getting married after she graduated.
Cool.
But when I came back from my mission, I came back one transfer early in order to start school so that I wouldn't be just sitting around for 2 months while the semester wasn't starting. And that was a really hard decision to make as a missionary who
Mhm.
wants to serve for 2 years and a complete 2 years and give everything. I think that was the right decision for me to get back and get right into it. I think I had, 3 or 4 days between when I got home and was released and when classes started. And I'm glad that I could just kickstart life into gear right there. And I think the Lord really gave me that opportunity because he put me to work right there too, right? He had work for me to do. It wasn't just in Chile. He had work for me to do in College Station, and I had a really good time getting into classes, really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and continuing to have a relationship with the Lord. I'll say one more thing is that when I was on a mission, this was maybe the most naive thing I thought, but I thought, when I get home, I'll have so much more time to study the scriptures. I can't wait to have more than an hour to do personal study. And I'll say that life got really busy really fast. And I will attest that I don't do an hour of personal study as often since I got home from my mission.
That's something we all say to ourselves.
Yeah.
You're gifted time on your mission to serve the Lord through studying about his life.
Yeah.
And then you come home and all of a sudden you're studying more about other things like things you're learning in school and things that you think you're going to do in your profession. And all of a sudden now it competes with the time that you study and serve the Lord. So
That's
no,
right.
I understand that. I love that. So, and I can honestly say that you and Paige both married up. So that, good on you. And you had a wise mission leader to let you go home. I can say as a former mission leader myself, that would have been an easy decision for me. We want our missionaries to go straight back to work and not put on their old blue jeans, as they say,
Yep.
just to get right back to work. And that's what you did in your life. So I love that.
Yeah.
So you had quite an academic journey.
Yeah.
And as I knew you, as I read about you, could you just take our listeners, not everyone gets this opportunity, not everyone like me is smart enough to be able to take that journey. So I would love, and by the way, just to be no fairness, my high school years, I was a miserable student, terrible, absolutely terrible. I cannot believe I got into any college.
None of us are surprised, Sid. None of us are. No, I'm only kidding. That comes as a big surprise.
No, no. I mean, coming back from my mission though, I took things more seriously, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, for me, academic pursuits became my pursuit, and
Yeah.
so I can appreciate a life of another individual who also took their academic pursuits pretty seriously. So, could you take us through that journey? I think that's a great story to share with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Texas A&M, I was in the business honors group there, and that was an awesome experience for me to be surrounded by really good teachers and professors and students. But I had an opportunity, and my father actually attended the London School of Economics for a year during his undergraduate career at the University of Utah. And he said, "William, you should do that." And I thought, the last thing I want to do is do everything you did and do exactly like you did. So, no, I'm not going to apply to the London School of Economics for a year of my undergraduate career. And he kind of looked at me and he said, "Well, look, you don't have to do it, but at least apply. And if you have the option, great, but you may not even get in." And I thought, oh, that sounds like a challenge. And
Yeah.
so I applied and I was fortunate to get in. So what ended up happening is my wife and I got married, and then I went to the London School of Economics for my junior year. And we immediately went over there, and it was like a year-long honeymoon. And it was, it was a punch in the gut to go from a good academically rigorous A&M environment to the London School of Economics, where 70% of the students are from international communities, where it feels like every one of those students is their country's hope for a better future. And they are working so hard. The grading system there, if you get a 70 or above, that's an A. If you get a 60 to 70, that's a B, you're fine. If you get a 50 to 60, that's a C and you passed. If you get an 80 to a 90, that means your work should have been published in an academic journal. If you get a 90 to 100, it means you revolutionized thought in that in that, area of expertise. And that was a whole different level of expectation than I was used to. The last anecdote I'll give is that at A&M, on a Friday afternoon, you could have done a parade through the library and not bothered anybody. And at LSE, it was Friday at 6 o'clock, and you couldn't find a seat in the library. I mean, it was packed. People were just so dedicated to what they were doing, and the professors were so talented. And it was a real struggle for me. I mean, I really struggled and was fortunate to do well there and come away with good grades. But it was a great experience, and that's where we got to meet you and your family, and
Hmm.
really developed some amazing lifelong friendships with other people there in London. And it was a great experience for Paige and I. We still love London. It's our favorite city on earth. I ended up coming back to Houston to do investment banking after my year in London and really enjoyed that. And then went to my senior year. I applied for business school in a kind of interesting way. They have a program called the 2+2 program at the Harvard Business School where you can apply while you're an undergraduate student, meaning that you would do 2 years of work and then 2 years of a full-time MBA. And so I applied for that program, took the GMAT in London, and applied over kind of the summer I was doing investment banking. And I was fortunate to get accepted to Harvard Business School. Again, following my father's footsteps, he went to the Harvard Business School as well. In fact, he and three of his brothers all went to the Harvard Business School. And so it had been an influence in my life for a long time, a kind of a goal or aspiration of mine that I would go there. And so when I got accepted to the Harvard Business School right before my senior year of college, um, I I kind of took that opportunity to step back and say, what do I really want for my life? Do I want to go investment banking and then, kind of do or consulting and do the career that so many others do, which is an amazing career and such good training, and then business school and then go on to other things? Or what would be the most beneficial for me and what I want out of my life? And I kind of thought, hey, I want to get inside of a company and work with a really good management team right out of school, because I don't know that I'll have an opportunity to do that again for a number of years. And so that's what I did. I looked for a great management team in the energy industry. So I worked at Oil States International with a wonderful CEO there named Cindy Taylor. She was amazing. And I worked at Oil States for 2 years and then went to Harvard Business School for 2 years. And during that time at Oil States, the stock price when I joined was probably in the 90s, and when I left was probably in the 20s, because we went through a terrible cycle in the oil and gas industry. We had activist investors involved that we were fighting off. We split up half the company, and then we had debt problems that we were trying to renegotiate. And it was an awesome experience for a young guy right out of undergrad who wanted to go to business school to see all these different dynamics. And it was one of those experiences where you aren't quite sure what you're learning, but you know what you're learning is going to be important to you later on in life. And I'm so grateful for the people that I was working with and the environment I was in during that time.
Okay, so just a couple more questions, and then we'll get into the open-ended ones of your learnings here. So you worked at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, and you also worked at Oil States that you already mentioned. What other jobs did you have to prepare you to go out on your own? Because that's a big
Yeah.
step.
So when I was in an undergrad, I had an opportunity to work for Mitt Romney's campaign as a travel aide. And while I was on that campaign, I learned from candidate Romney, Governor Romney at the time, that he kind of looked at life in 30-year increments and said the first 30 years are for learning, the next 30 years for earning, and the last 30 years for giving back. And once that got into my head, it's never gotten out. And I think it's an awesome opportunity. I also had the opportunity to work when I was at A&M for President George H.W. Bush, 41. His presidential library is at A&M, and I went to go interview for a job. I thought it would be, collecting tickets at the front desk of the library. And at the end of the interview process, they said, we actually have an opening in his office in Houston. Would you be willing to work in President Bush's office once a week? And I said, oh, absolutely. And so I redid my class schedule and whatever I could do. And every Friday I would drive down there and work for half a day with President Bush. And while what I was doing was very menial tasks, being in that environment was fantastic and really, really helpful. And I found that no matter what job I was doing, I had an internship at a hospital in Houston, and then I talked about investment banking, and then my jobs at oil states. Whatever I did, I just wanted to do it well. It didn't have to be the most high profile job. It didn't have to be the thing that was going to get across the CEO's desk. And you see so many times people that are very ambitious trying to do the most high profile thing. And as soon as they get their day one, they want to be known for being great. And I've found that the people that I admire and are successful don't look for the thing that is most prestigious, but are looking to do what needs to be done in the best way possible. And often it means doing the job that nobody else wants to do. And so I've always looked for opportunities to just do the things nobody else wants to do and do it really well. And it turns out people kind of notice when you do something nobody else wants to do and they do it well, and then they appreciate you. And sometimes that's opened up doors for me that have been really meaningful.
I love that advice. I love the learn, earn, and give back concept. That idea is important for all of us. I don't know if I would do it in 30-year increments. I would subtract a decade or so
Well, here's why
before
that
you're
was
doing
important to
that.
me is because when I was leaving Harvard Business School, I was 28. Is that right? Maybe about that. And I had an opportunity to go into private equity immediately or go to the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas and learn. And the chairman or the president of the Federal Reserve at that time was a guy named Robert Kaplan, who had been vice chairman of Goldman Sachs. He'd been a professor at Harvard Business School, and he was one of the smartest people I'd ever been around and interacted with. He came to HBS, gave a talk. At the end of his talk, he said, "By the way, I'm hiring for this position as kind of a chief of staff for me at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Is anybody interested?" And so I went up to him afterwards and I said, "That sounds really interesting. I'd love to learn more." He said, "Well, it's a 2-year position. Don't know what happens after that, but if you're interested, would love to talk." And so I applied and was able to get that position. And this was not what I went to Harvard Business School expecting to do. But when I knew that I could learn a lot from him, I could learn a lot from being at the Federal Reserve, where I would have the opportunity to learn about the macroeconomic environment, what the macroeconomic puzzle pieces look like, and interact with amazing and successful business leaders from around Texas, Louisiana, and New Mexico, which is the region that Federal Reserve Bank covers. And having that experience was awesome. I did learn a lot. It was challenging and it was difficult, and I'm so glad I did it. And then went to private equity and did 5 or 6 years in private equity, where I was leading a portfolio of venture capital investments in the energy industry, through COVID and through some difficult times in the energy industry. And it was so fun and difficult and challenging, but rewarding at the same time to help people grow their businesses and to have the confidence of a team of investment professionals that I was working with at that firm to believe in what we were doing and the companies we were supporting. But you're working with a team, and at some point I said, I really want to do this on my own, and that's when I decided that I would go to start my own investment firm and look for teams and businesses and management that we can support and help grow and really just help them achieve their goals. And hopefully we can provide some capital and some strategic advice and other ways to help them do that.
So you've mentioned about mentors, and obviously networking is something that you do very well. I've always found those to be quite important to me in my career and my career development. As we start talking about lessons learned or things you'd like to share as we think about what advice you would give to others, what would you say about mentors, about networking, about being willing to walk up after a presentation and say, "Hey, I'm your guy," or "I am interested in that," and
Yeah.
then following through on that? I think these are important skills that all return missionaries need to learn.
Yeah. I'd say that you never know who's going to be a mentor in your life and who's going to be important in your life. Treat everybody as if they have the potential to be an important guidepost to you in your life. And for example, the experience I had working with President Bush in his office, the person who has made an impact to me more than almost anybody there was one of the front desk ladies at that office. And I didn't realize how important she would be, but it turns out that, just making a good impression on her really was helpful to me in other ways and later in my life, and nothing dramatic or important, but it's instances like that that remind me that you never know how important somebody's going to be in your life. My accounting professor at A&M is now the dean of the Mays Business School and a great friend. He and his wife are both friends. They were at church with they're members of the church as well. And so we got to know them through church, and he's stake president there now and doing great things, and we've gotten to work together on a few A&M things. His name is Nate Sharp, wonderful guy. And there are other people. There was a person who I was hosting to speak at A&M as a student. He was coming to speak at one of our classes, and he's been a great professional mentor of mine. And I actually office with him right now. When I went to go launch my own thing, he's the person I went to say, "Hey, what should I do? How you've done this? How do I do this?" And he said, "Well, look, don't sit in an office by yourself. Come sit in our office. You can brainstorm with us. You can learn from us." And I'm forever indebted to that generosity that he gave me. I mean, we ran into you, Sid, and your family at church, right? And we've had an opportunity to interact occasionally over the years because of our overlap in the oil and gas industry. But we have opportunities to do things like this, and you served in Hawaii, where members of our ward were serving as mission presidents, and we have friends that are there. And so the world is too small not to just be kind to everybody and know that you have more to learn from them than they might have to learn from you, and be humble about what you are, and who you are, and what you know, because they're just so much more fun to have friends from all stages of life wherever you go.
Wonderful advice. The idea of just being good to everybody, to don't deferentially treat those you think are the most important ones in your
Yeah,
life because you had no idea. Because somebody Father's putting these people in your life, so you might as well just love everyone
yeah.
as he loves everyone. That's a really good example.
My
And I
my
love the
dad.
idea. Go ahead.
Sorry, one more anecdote on this, but my grandfather was a banker. He really ran Zion's Bank in Salt Lake City. Roy Simmons was his name. And he told my dad something that my dad's told me, which is that, as a banker, you can lend people money with the expectation that they're never going to pay you back, or the expectation that they're trying their best to pay you back.
Mm,
And he said, life is a lot more fun if you treat everybody as if they're trying really hard to pay you back. And,
yeah.
I think that just mentality of giving people the benefit of the doubt and knowing that everybody's trying their best, it goes a long way.
That is a lesson I've learned, judge much less and love a lot more because people, I believe, are doing the very best they can. I think your dad gave you some wise wisdom there because if you treat them as if they owe you or that anything you give, you've got to get in return plus some interest, then you're going to run into a lot of roadblocks in your life as opposed to more abundant mentalities, as we've heard. So obviously, you're raised by wise parents. Well, we've just thoroughly enjoyed this time together. Thank you. What would be the last words you say to that returned missionary who just got home if you're speaking to them directly?
I'd say the challenges are ahead of you. You had some hard days on your mission, and you'll have hard days ahead. But don't forget what got you through it. It was faith, and it was hard work. And as I reflect on my mission, and I'm sure that missionary would too, he will look back and think, the parts of my mission that I enjoyed the most and got the most out of were the hardest parts. and the days where I was working the hardest and working the longest. And that's going to continue to be true in life, that sometimes when you're going through those hard moments, it may not feel like it's very fun. But when you get to the other side of it, you're going to be able to look back and see how much you've grown and see how much your faith grew because you were able to achieve more than you thought possible. And you can look back and you can say, why, how did I do that? It's because you relied on the Lord and because he was there to support you, because you're a child of God, because he has eternal expectations of you. You have eternal potential. And I think that as missionaries, it's return missionaries, there is a lot of pressure to act a certain way, to do things a certain way. And just know that it doesn't really matter what other people think. What matters is your relationship with God and putting him first. And you're going to go through challenges and it's going to be hard sometimes, but you're loved, you're appreciated, and that you can continue to put one foot in front of the other. And if you need help, you can reach out for help.
Well, from one Southerner to another, amen, brother. Amen.
Thanks, Sid. Talk soon. Appreciate you.
We hope you enjoyed today's program. It is our sincere hope that you gain insights from these lived experiences of disciples of Jesus Christ as you navigate your next chapters in life. We look forward to having you join us each week for the unfolding chapters of our guest. Remember to follow us on Instagram at rmnextchapters. Also, you can visit us on our website at rmnextchapters.com, where you can listen to each podcast or link to your favorite podcasting platform. As always, if you have any thoughts or feedback, we'd love to hear it. Please send it to rmnextchapters@gmail.com. See you soon.